Shabbat Shalom. Huge crowd today. So yeah, sorry for my voice. I'm like still allergies or whatever it is. So if I sound like a goat, it's okay. I'm sorry. So anyways, I forgot the slide for the blessings. So so what we're gonna cover today is gonna be Judah's redemption arc. That's the best way that I could put it. Judah is one of the sons of Jacob. He's Joseph's brother. Very important because Yeshua or Jesus, he's supposed to descend from Judah. That's like his great grandfather. Yeshua couldn't have been the Messiah if he wasn't descended from him. So he's like a really important role, I guess, like in the biblical story. And then we're going to see some parallels between Yeshua and Joseph. And then we're going to cover Matthew 15 and Matthew 16 because we weren't able to do 15 last week, so we'll just do both. All right, so for Judah's redemption arc, we start with kind of a review of the Joseph story. So Joseph is the son of Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons and a daughter. And so Jacob really loves Joseph. He's like his favorite son. So he makes him a coat of many colors. That's a lot of times what it's translated as. Whenever you see like the Joseph movie, has anybody seen the Joseph movie? Yes. Okay. So they usually like a lot of like rainbows and stuff, but that's not what it was. So whenever you look at like the actual translation, that was like an old like theory. People thought it was a coat of many colors, but when you actually look at the Hebrew word, it was probably like a long sleeved jacket that reached to the ankle. And it was really important. And when you see, these are like old people from that time. And you see this, like, they have like long jackets and stuff like that. So the thing about clothing and why was it so important, right? So like, why would Jacob give Joseph a fancy coat? And why does the Bible have to tell us that, right? Like, why was it a big deal? Because nowadays we see that and we're like, okay, he got a fancy coat. I have a fancy coat. What's so important about it? First of all, back in the day, people used to have like maybe one or two clothings. Like they did not have a whole wardrobe. And fancy clothing was used to mark status. So it could indicate like social roles. It establishes like social worth. So basically like if you were like the firstborn or if you're like a really important person, even nowadays, like the president dresses very fancy for speeches or like in Britain, like whenever they do like coronations, these are with like very fancy clothing. So it's been the same since that time. And so whenever we see for Joseph, we see that it had to do with that, right? So the fact that Jacob gave Joseph that coat, he was basically telling me, hey, you're going to be the next, basically the firstborn, right? So the brothers didn't like that because the brothers, they wanted to get part of the inheritance because that basically means like, hey, this is the number one son and you guys are second, because there always had to be a number one son to take the inheritance when the dad would pass away. And so the tunic that was given to Joseph, it symbolizes like high social standing. So that's why the brothers got really, really mad. Brothers was not happy about that at all, okay? So then Joseph knows how the brothers think, right? He knows that they hate him. Literally the Bible says they hated Joseph, like his brothers. And so Joseph has dreams, and he has dreams that basically mean that he's going to be the head honcho. He's going to be the top brother. He's going to be like the stars are going to bow to him, and like the wheat is going to bow to him. So he goes and he tells his brothers. Was that a smart thing to do, knowing the family situation? That was not the smartest thing to do, but he was young. He was like 17 years old. He didn't know better. So he just goes and he tells them the dream. Hey guys, I had a dream that there's 11 stars and they're all bowing to me. Coincidence, y'all are 11. So you know what I mean? We're going to see how Joseph changes after that. And so the brothers were not happy. They throw Joseph in a pit, and they take his garment and they rip up his garment, right? And so Joseph being thrown into a pit actually symbolized death. He didn't literally die, but it's like a symbolism of death. So we see in a lot of different verses in the Bible, like in Psalm 34, it mentions that you have brought, like, Lord, you have brought my soul from the grave and you have revived me from my descent into the pit. So basically, like, the grave represents death. So in this case, like, the two words are used as synonyms. So whenever we see that Joseph was thrown into the pit, it basically represents him dying, right? Not literally, but it represents him dying. And it's going to be very important for later on. Seems kind of like a random detail. So then when we see Genesis 37, so a couple weeks ago, so we saw that Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother. He's our own flesh and blood. and his brothers agreed. So they were just basically going to kill Joseph. They were going to let him there to die in the pit, literally. They're like, you know what, let's just sell him. Let's make some money out of this. And that way we don't have the conscience that we killed our brother, right? So that's nice. At least they didn't murder him, I guess. So, but notice that was Judah who said that. Again, we're going to look at that later. And so then Judah, he goes to his father, well, all the brothers. They all go, they take Joseph's tunic that his dad had given him. They killed a goat, and they spilled it with blood so that his dad thinks that Joseph is dead. And they give it to his father, and obviously his father is not happy. He's very sad. And it mentions that they took Joseph's coat, and they slaughtered a goat, and they dripped the coat in blood. And then they said to his father, we have found this. Now recognize if it is your son's coat or not, right? They use that phrase in Hebrew. That's going to be very important for later as well. But very fun fact, do you guys remember who else deceived their father with a goat and a clothing? Jacob, exactly. Because Jacob went to Isaac to get the blessing, and he made goat soup, and he like put the goat here because his brother was really hairy. So he basically cheated his brother out of the blessing, but he didn't. What he did. So yeah, so it's like what goes around comes around. It's really interesting. There's a lot of goats and clothing in this story. So anyways, that's just a fun fact. It's not really for later. All right, and then, so we're like in the Joseph story, right? Everything's going well. Well, not going well, unfortunately, but we're all just moving along with the Joseph story. And then out of nowhere, the Bible just completely switches, and it's like, we're going to talk about Judah and Tamar, right? Just it seems so random. We're just talking about Joseph, and then Joseph gets taken to Egypt, and then like we end there, basically. And then randomly we see this random story has nothing to do with it. Judah and Tamar. Has anybody heard of the Judah and Tamar story? Yes. Okay. It's one of the most interesting stories in the Bible. It's weird, but we're going to talk about it. So the Judah and Tamar story is completely unrelated, but it's actually related because it has to do with Judah. So remember, Judah was part of the plot to basically kill Joseph. They told his father that Joseph had died. You know, that was really, really bad what they did. Obviously pretty messed up. So now we're going to see how basically this changed Judah in a way. So Judah, one of the brothers of Joseph, he moves away from his family. He marries a local woman, and they have 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah, right? So he had 3 kids. It's really interesting because it says that Judah went down meaning down to the south. What's really interesting is that Joseph was also brought down. So basically like they're both going through things, and they're very parallel in a way, okay? So then, I don't know why I put that slide there. Then Judah's oldest son, he marries Tamar, right? But he does something wrong. The Bible doesn't really say what he did wrong. And he married her, and then he dies, okay? So then, in the ancient time, there was this practice that if you married someone and you died, the wife had to marry the brother, okay? It's kind of messed up. It's weird, but it makes sense for that time. It's kind of a whole long other thing, but everybody used to do that in that time. It was like the only way to like save a woman's like everything, basically. Her whole status, her economy, and whatever. There was no like women's rights. So that's like the only way. So yeah, so basically they do that. So she marries a brother, but he also dies because he didn't want her to have kids. And read Genesis 38 and find out how. Anyways, so then it literally says it there. So then Judah tells Tamar to wait till his younger son grows up. Because again, she legally has to marry the next brother, but he's a kid. So he's like, okay, you know what? Wait for the younger one to grow up, and then you'll have him as a husband. Again, that's her only hope of ever getting anything. Otherwise, in the ancient times, she would either have to go into prostitution or slavery or complete poverty. Like there was no other options for her in that time, okay? So it's kind of weird what they were doing, but it's totally normal for that time. Not applicable to today, okay? So don't go marrying your sister-in-laws. Anyways, so yeah. So she's waiting for the brother to grow up, but then Judah doesn't do that, and he doesn't give her supposed to be husband, right? So then Tamar dresses up like a prostitute, and she meets with Judah without him realizing who she is. She sleeps with her, and she becomes pregnant, okay? That's what it says. It's Genesis 38. It's a very weird story. And so she says, okay, Judah, I need payment, and I need an ID. So she asks for a goat and the staff and a seal, this seal. So it was like basically your social security number in that time. So Judah was desperate, okay? So his whole ID, like the staff was an ID, that was an ID. Basically your social security in that time was that. A goat was a lot of money. Again, goats, see where is this going? So he deceives her, right? But you notice how there was a deception with a goat. Why was this like this? Okay, sorry. All right, so then there's the goat, right? And so the same thing, he deceived his father with a goat, and I was going to get deceived with a goat as well, because he didn't know she was his daughter-in-law. Yeah, so he did not know. So about 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she's not pregnant. And Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. Okay? Hypocrite much. Anyway, like, okay, he didn't know. So he was like, you know what? She can die. That's fine. So what happened? She was brought out to the city square, and as she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law saying, I'm pregnant by the man who owns these. And she showed him the proof. And then see if you recognize the seal and coat and staff these are. And Judah recognized them, and he said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her my son Selah. So notice what she told him. She told him, recognize, that's the same thing he told his dad. So you see how it comes full circle? So he told his dad, hey, recognize to see if this is your son's coat, when he was deceiving his dad. Now, he has to go recognize, hey, she's pregnant. Recognize to see if these are your things. So you see how everything went back like full circle? So he's basically being tested for what he did to his dad, right? It's messed up, but he messed it up. He kept messing up, and everything, like God just keeps testing him until he changes, right? So how do we go from this to this? Because then when he tells her when she tells him recognize, he says, yes, he admits his wrong. And he says, yes, she's more righteous than I am, because I wouldn't give her my son Selah, because legally he was supposed to give her the son. So only hope she had, right? And so he recognized his mistake, right? So you notice how it went full circle. He did some messed up stuff, was not supposed to do that, but eventually he like fixed his mistake, right? So that story was basically like the turning point in Judah's life. He goes from throwing Joseph in a pit, basically almost murdering his brother, faking to his dad that his brother's dead. So imagine doing that to your dad. Like, that's just messed up. Like, you tell, yeah, so your son's dead, and here's the coat. You know that he's alive, and you did it. Like, imagine how messed up that has to be. And then he goes on, does some more messed up stuff, but eventually God changes him, right? And so the same word that is said, he said to his father, is said to him. So everything that goes around comes around, and God used that to change him. How do we know that he changed, right? He literally said that. He said, she's more righteous than I am. And we're going to see a little bit later how it all comes full circle. And in the Jewish commentaries, they also see that. Basically, like the rabbis, they like know about this. They say, identify please whose signet it is. And they said, the Holy One, blessed be he, our God, said to Judah, so you said to your father, identify please. As you live, Tamar will say to you, identify please. So basically, it came all full circle. So what he did was done to him. So it's like an irony of sorts. But while all of that is happening, a lot of stuff, what's been happening to Joseph at the same time? So remember, Joseph was taken to Egypt. So basically in Egypt, Joseph actually is doing pretty well. He actually gets to be like one of the really, really high in command in like one of the most important houses in Egypt, like one of the most important people in Egypt. So he's doing really, really well. But then he gets taken to prison. And because the dude that hired Joseph, his wife tried to get with him and he said no. So he took his clothes and pretended that he violated her. And so Joseph was sent to prison. Joseph was like, I didn't do anything. I don't want to do nothing. And he was unfairly sent to prison. So imagine being Joseph. You're taken away from your family's home. You're thrown and sold into slavery. You finally get something good in your life. And then this woman accuses you, didn't do anything, and you get thrown into prison. Like, imagine Joseph. Like, it sucks, right? But did he ever abandon God? No, he didn't. He had every reason to, because everything was going wrong for him, right? But he didn't abandon God. And that's like the most important thing about Joseph. We'll see that later too. And then we'll see, and then when he was in prison, there was 2 people in prison with him. They had dreams, and so he interpreted their dreams. So basically those people, they leave prison and tell Pharaoh, hey, Joseph interprets dreams because Pharaoh was having dreams and he was really confused. He also had a lot of makeup. So Pharaoh, so Pharaoh was having these dreams and he was like freaking out because he didn't know what they meant, right? And so he needed somebody to interpret the dreams, and the Egyptians didn't know how to interpret the dreams. So the guys that went out of prison were like, hey, there's this guy Joseph in prison and he actually interpreted a dream really well. So you should call him. So then Joseph gets taken out of prison. Remember how like I told you that the pit was like death? He goes again to death again, and then been taken back, right? So then when Joseph gets taken to Pharaoh, he interprets the dream, right? But what does Joseph say? Does Joseph say, yeah, I'm a really good dream interpreter and I'm amazing and I deserve this because life has been really cruel to me? No. What does Joseph say to Pharaoh? I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer that he desires. Notice the change from like before when his brothers, like he just randomly tells his brothers, hey, I had this dream. Not the greatest idea. You have to like see how you communicate. They hate you, right? The change in Joseph where he's like in complete humility to Pharaoh, he's saying, no, I don't interpret the dreams. God interprets the dreams. I'm just a messenger for God, right? So he didn't have a reason to do that, right? Life was going really bad for him, but he still stayed faithful to God, right? And so then he gets put second in command in Egypt. So everything's going very well. And basically the whole dreams that Pharaoh was having was that there's going to be a big famine. And so Joseph said, okay, I have a plan. Let's just save up a bunch of food and then we can survive. All right. So then out of nowhere, his brothers come to visit. Plot twist. And his brothers come and they're like, hey, we're from Canaan and we want some food. And Joseph was like, there's no way you guys are here. Like, what? But the brothers didn't know him because he looked really Egyptian. That was like 20 years after. And so obviously, they was not going to recognize him. So the famine continues. They run out of food. So Judah convinces Jacob to let Benjamin go to Egypt with them. This is this parasha, almost starting this parasha. It's kind of like a review because it's a lot. So basically, the brothers return to Egypt and they return with Benjamin. Okay, so why is Benjamin important? Because Benjamin is the other, so basically Jacob married Rachel, right? That's like the wife that he liked, that he loved most. And they had 2 kids. So there was Joseph and Benjamin, right? The other ones were from other women and he didn't like them that much. So Joseph was like the favorite child, right? But then when Joseph is gone, Benjamin is basically a basic favorite child because he's the only one left from his wife, from the wife that he loved. And so whenever the brothers went to Egypt, they didn't take Benjamin because Jacob was like, I'm not risking you guys. You guys are not taking my other son, my other favorite son, not taking him with you. But then Joseph was like, why did you guys bring Benjamin over? And then they didn't know who was Joseph. So they were like, what are we going to do now? Like, and Joseph was like, bring your other brother. So Joseph was basically testing his brother to see if they had changed, right? And so they bring Benjamin. A whole bunch of stuff happens. It's kind of a lot. You're able to take a picture of the screen. I don't know. It's a lot, okay? But basically, in the end, Joseph kind of like accuses them falsely of stealing from him. He's testing him because they don't know Joseph is there, right? And Joseph is literally like the vice president of Egypt, right? So Joseph, the vice president of Egypt, he accuses them of stealing from him. And he says, okay, well, I'm going to take your brother Benjamin, okay? So since you guys stole from me, I'm going to take Benjamin with me, right? So he's testing them to see if they're going to do to Benjamin what they did to him, right? Because Benjamin is the other favorite. So he's like, okay, let's see if what you guys are going to do about it. Because again, he remembers his brothers threw him under the bus, literally threw him under the bus to the pit. And then Joseph is like, okay, let's see if they've actually changed. So, hey, you guys stole from me. Now you have to give me your brother and he'll be a slave forever and you guys can leave. It's fine. So he basically offered them to do again what they had done to him, right? So basically he's like, okay, we'll just sell him to slavery. And this week's Torah portion, what does Judah do? The one that sold Joseph, the one whose idea was to sell Joseph to slavery, he had the opportunity to do the same thing again. Could have told his dad, hey, he died on the way. The same thing that he'd done again. But what did Judah do? Here's where we see the complete turnaround, how he changed. So the Judah went up to him and said, pardon your servant, my Lord. Let me speak a word to my Lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. So he's really important. He doesn't know this is Joseph. So he's like, please have mercy on the boy, right? So he says, now if the boy is not with us and I go back to your servant, my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die because the dad's going to die from sadness. Your servants will bring the gray head of your father down to the grave in Sardis. He's going to be slowly sad for the rest of his life. And your servant guaranteed the boy's safety for my father. I said, if I don't bring him back to you, I will bear the blame for you for all my life. So Judah says, again, remember, Judah was the one that was like, why don't we sell him into slavery, sell Joseph into slavery? And then Joseph was like, okay, you want to do the same thing to Benjamin? You guys will be fine, just sell him to slavery. What does Judah say? Now, please, let your servant remain here as my Lord's servant in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, don't let me see the misery that will come on my father. So he had the opportunity to do the exact same thing he did to Joseph, and he didn't, right? So that's why whenever we see like that random story of Judah, like randomly there, just out of nowhere, it's important, it's there, because how does Judah change into this? Because he could have just done the same thing all over again. But that's why we see that story, because he changed. So Judah transforms from being envious of Jacob's affection for Joseph and selling him into slavery. He goes from that to offering himself as a slave to save Benjamin, right? So he did the complete turnaround of what he had done before. He goes from this to that. Completely, totally 180 from what he had done before. And then, remember Tamar, right? Remember she was pregnant, right? So she was pregnant. She actually had twins from Judah, right? Though one of those twins is actually Jesus's a bunch of times great grandfather. So he's actually from the line of Yeshua, right? So notice how it's just like God takes imperfect people with their flaws, changes them, and then they get a place of honor, right? Like she's literally in the genealogy of Jesus, of Yeshua. Like that's so crazy how it's like God just took people who are so imperfect, but Judah made a change, right? He did a bunch of mistakes, but he made a change and he decided to do the right thing, and look at the honor that God gave him. You get to be the great-great-grandfather of the eternal king of Israel, right? You notice how it's like a crazy, crazy thing. And there's a lot for a lot of those people. Oh, yeah? Okay. But yeah, so yeah, it's crazy, right? But yeah, so again, people make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. It's life. But how you come back from those mistakes, and if you rectify the mistakes, that's what's going to change basically everything, right? So Judah, he could have done the same thing that he did with Benjamin, and his dad wouldn't have known. He could have just said, yeah, he died on the way. Like, he could have literally said the exact same thing, but he didn't. He made a change, and he changed his life around. He didn't make the same mistake twice, and God rewarded him, right? So that's just really, really crazy. Just one example of many stories in the Bible of imperfect people being used by God for his perfect purpose. Does not mean that you get to go with prostitutes and have kids with them, okay? That's not what that means, okay? Just because the Bible says something happened does not mean it's condoning it, right? It's still wrong. The Bible literally says it's wrong, but God uses imperfections for his perfect purpose, right? So the same thing people say about like polygamy. People say, well, yeah, that's fine because the Bible says it, like, you know. But it's not right. It just depends on the context. That's like back in the day, right? And so the Bible says a lot of things. It doesn't mean it's right. It just means that it's there. It happened. Just like the same thing with Judah and Tamar. It happened. It was wrong, right? But Judah made a change. And that's the whole point, right? The Bible doesn't show you perfect people. Like the only perfect one obviously is Yeshua. But other than Yeshua, there was no perfect person in the Bible. Nobody was meant to be perfect. But it's how they go about it, how they change after. If they change, that's what matters. So you're always going to have to make choices in life, and those decisions determine what happens to you in the long run. So it's all about choices. Life is all about choices. We saw Judah made the wrong choice a bunch of times, but when the going got tough and he actually had to make the right choice for once, he did, and he got rewarded, right? And so that's just really important. Keep in mind. So we go from, again, Joseph telling the dreams. He goes in the pit. His father thinks he's dead. He gets accused. And then the Judah thing. And then after all of that, then Judah's like, yep, she's right. He could have just lied. He could have said, no, I don't know who that is. That's not my court. That's not my goat, right? Who would have believed? Well, they would have believed him and they would have just burned her, right? And he didn't have to worry about the kids. He didn't have to worry about her. He didn't have to worry about anything. He could have just said, that was not me, right? But he didn't. He manned up and he made up for his mistakes, right? And then again, he mans up and he goes to Joseph and he doesn't let his brother be taken into slavery like Joseph was, right? It's a complete 180, but it's all showing you that once you choose God's way, you'll be blessed. The same thing with Judah. he didn't choose God's way a lot of times, and it went bad for him. He lost 2 sons. They literally died, right? So how do you go from that to literally being the genealogy of the eternal God of Israel, not the eternal Messiah of Israel? It's crazy, right? So with that in mind, talking about Joseph, we're going to see some connections between Joseph and Yeshua. This is really, really interesting. Not too in-depth. It's just kind of like very, very interesting. So you guys remember how Joseph was sold, right, for 20 shekels of silver. So whenever they threw him down the pit, they were like, you know what? Let's just sell him. Let's make some money off of it, right? And so so when the Midianites, the merchants came up, so his brothers took Joseph out of the pit, and they sold him for 20 shekels. So a shekel is kind of like 2 ounces, around 2 ounces. So think of like a large silver coin like this. That's kind of like what it would have been. So it was like 20 pieces of silver. Who else was sold for silver? What? Exactly. So, if anybody wants to read this for me, so I can drink water.
I'll read.
Thank you.
Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, I don't really know it in Spanish, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over.
Again, Yeshua was also sold for silver, and Joseph was. Yes.
Are you going to talk about Zechariah?
No.
There's a quote, I'll find it.
Yeah.
But in Zechariah, it says that he'll be exchanged for 30 pieces of silver.
Oh,
But I'll find
interesting.
it.
Oh, I did not know that. That's interesting. But yeah, so we see that parallel. So Joseph was sold for silver, and Yeshua was also turned over for silver. And then again, we see the idea of Joseph being in the pit, which represents death. Yeshua literally died, and he was resurrected, right? In the case of Joseph, he wasn't literally resurrected, but he was metaphorically resurrected. Because in Hebrew, whenever you see the word for pit, it means grave. It's the same. I mean, it kind of, you see it, it's similar, right? Like a pit and a grave is like a big hole in the ground. And so in Hebrew, it's the same, basically the same thing. And so in the case of Joseph, it was metaphorical. In the case of Yeshua, it was literal. But they both went from death to life, right? And Joseph was betrayed by his brothers. What was one of his brothers' names? Judah. Who was the one who betrayed Yeshua? Judas. So you notice how it all comes together, like it's all connected. It's just crazy. So yeah, so Judas betrays Yeshua, and he actually gets the payment. And the one that with the idea to sell Joseph was Judah. He was the one, hey, let's sell him. That was literally Judah. And so it's like a whole, it all comes together. It's all like metaphors and stuff. So it's really interesting. And then Yeshua, whenever he was being crucified, there was 2 criminals next to him, right? So there was 2 thieves. The Greek word, apparently it's rebels. It was like people that were rebelling against the Roman Empire in that time. And so whenever he's being crucified, there's 2 Romans next to him, 2 criminals. When Joseph was in prison, there was 2 guys with him in prison. Remember whenever he did the dream interpretation, but get this, it's really crazy. In the case of Yeshua, one of the criminals accepts Yeshua, and Yeshua says, you're gonna come with me to heaven, and the other one doesn't. In the case of Joseph, one of them gets executed and the other one gets taken out of prison. So it's literally the exact parallel of those where one lives and the other dies. And he's in prison. Joseph, remember, being in prison, it was like death because it was in the pit. And so with Yeshua, he was being crucified, which is death, right? So notice how the exact parallel, he's with 2 people, one dies and the other lives. So that's crazy. Yes, okay.
So I found it in Zechariah 11 when they're talking about the 2 shepherds.
Yeah.
It says, I told them, if you think it's best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord. What's interesting is also, it says here, after Judas returned the money in remorse, the chief priests used the 30 pieces of silver to buy a field from a potter.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. So there's a lot of parallels. And then Joseph, he's taken from prison and he's made second in command to Pharaoh and given authority over all of Egypt. Yeshua is resurrected, which is metaphorically what happened to Joseph, literally what happened to Yeshua. He's resurrected and then he's seated at the right hand of the Father and made prince over the earth, right? So Revelation literally talks about his coronation, how he's going to be king of the world through the Father gives him that authority. And so the same thing with Joseph. Joseph was brought from the pit, a metaphorical death, basically resurrected metaphorically to be second in command to Pharaoh, and then Yeshua is literally resurrected and made to the right hand of the Father, right? And so you see how like the same parallel to, like, there's like a lot of parallels here. It's crazy. And then this was the craziest one, in my opinion. So remember when the brothers saw Joseph, right? They didn't recognize him, right? Today, do Jews recognize Yeshua? Do they recognize Jesus? They don't, right? So it's the same thing. Like, his brothers saw him and they didn't recognize him. And the same thing nowadays in Judaism, they don't accept Yeshua yet, right? Eventually they will. We'll keep praying for that to happen. But generally with mainstream Judaism, they don't, right? And so it's the same thing that happened. Joseph gets taken away and then metaphorically dies, metaphorically resurrected, and everything happens, but then his brothers don't recognize him. And the same thing is happening today. So that's literally crazy because it's literally happening today. So that's crazy. And so, yes.
When he resurrected.
Oh yeah, So whenever he
And
resurrected.
he came back like he was sparkly and came back different.
Yeah.
So no one recognized him.
Yeah, exactly. So it all has to do with recognition. The same thing with Judah, where he told his father, "Do you recognize this coat?" And the father recognized it. And then Judah was told, "Recognize if this is your ID," right? Basically his ID. And now here you have to recognize Joseph. They don't recognize. So like the whole story of Joseph has to do with recognition. And with Yeshua is the same thing. Like the brothers don't recognize him. Who's recognizing what? Like the word for Hebrew recognizes so many times used in that part. So with the father, they said, "Hey, do you recognize this clothing from your son?" And then another parallel. Remember how whenever Yeshua was going to be crucified, they took his garments and they did like lots over it. So the Romans, they basically took his garments and they were like, "You know what? Let's just sell it and let's like play around, get the clothes." The same thing happened to Joseph. Joseph was taken off, his coat was taken off of him. And the brothers, what did they do? They sold Joseph. So it's like it all connects and it's just crazy. Like the more, like every year it's kind of like I found another one and it's crazy. But yeah, so just like a summary between the similarities between Yeshua and Joseph. Both were sold by a Judah, right? His brothers don't recognize him anymore. Both were sold for silver. There's a parallel between the two prisoners and the two men in the crucifixion where one dies and one lives. The death to life status reversal, basically. So they both, one metaphorically dies and the other one literally dies. And they both get brought from death to life and then seated in authority, right? In one case, Joseph was authority in Egypt. And in Yeshua's case, he's authority over the earth, right? So that's pretty interesting. It's like one of my favorite things. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Anyways, so we're going to look at Matthew 15. And if anybody has any questions or anything, if anything's not making sense, let me know, okay? So if anybody wants to read this, pretty please. Pretty please.
I'll go ahead and read it.
Thank you.
Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Yeshua from Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? Why don't they wash their hands before they eat?" Yeshua replied, "And why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is devoted to God, they are not to honor their father or mother with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition."
Did this make sense to anyone? Not really. In the beginning, when I first read the second part, I was like, what? Okay, but I'll explain. So it makes a lot of sense when you look at it. So the main point here is that basically in Jewish law, in like traditional law, in law, I guess it's not law because it's not biblical, it's like a tradition. There's a tradition of washing your hands before eating bread, okay? So in the traditional mindset, the Pharisees' mindset, they thought that, hey, because they came from Jerusalem, notice, because the Pharisees were like a high class. They were like the upper class in Jerusalem. That was like, Jerusalem was like, I guess, New York, like the metropolitan. Like imagine like I don't know, finance people from Manhattan came down. Like they're like the top from that time. So Pharisees from Jerusalem, I was like financiers from Manhattan, okay? And so they came to Yeshua and they said, "Hey, why do you guys breaking the tradition of the elders? Why aren't you washing your hands before you eat?" So we'll go into why he said this a little later, just like for context, okay? So there's different kinds of like impurities in the Bible. There's like impure animals, right? The ones that like traditionally not eaten, like, you know, dogs and eagles and bats. Don't eat bats. It didn't go well last time. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so, and then there's ritual impurity, okay? So ritual impurity is like emissions, case of dudes, the time of the month, case of girls, and touching a corpse, and there's a lot of different ones, okay? So this is like the biblical impurities, okay? But what's really important is that those things aren't bad. It's not a sin. It only applies in the context of the temple, okay? So a lot of times people read Leviticus, and like in my case, like when I was younger, I would read Leviticus and I would be like, oh my goodness, the time of the month is just like a sin or something. It's not a sin, it's nothing bad. It just has to do with the temple, okay? So basically the temple, like in that time it existed, it was destroyed after Yeshua. The temple could only be connected to life, okay? So anything that was connected to any sort of like lifespan thing that has to do with death, like touching a corpse, the time of the month, it all connected to death and blood and death in a way. And so basically that can't have any connection to the temple, okay? So we're gonna go into why this is, okay? We're gonna look at touching a corpse. That's the most PG one. Anyway, so imagine we have a guy named Jeff, okay? And Jeff accidentally touches a corpse, okay? In some way, he goes to a grave or somebody dies on him. In the case of Paul, it happened to Paul, where somebody literally died and fell on top of him. He had to go to the temple and restart his whole vow. It's a whole story for another day. But now Jeff is impure. Okay, so what does it mean that he's impure? He's really sad and depressed. All right, so what happens to Jeff now, right? He's impure. Either one, he dies. Two, he sinned and he has to make atonement. Or literally nothing unless he wants to go to the temple. What happens to Jeff?
3.
Yes, literally nothing happens. He's good. He did not sin. He's totally fine. The Bible says he's impure, but it only applies for the temple. Are we in the temple? No, we're not. We're not in the temple. The temple is literally in Jerusalem. It's not even built yet. None of that, right? So it's not even existing. So it has nothing to do with Jeff. Jeff is literally good. Like he doesn't have to do anything. He's technically impure, but he doesn't have to do anything unless he wants to go to the temple, right? So he's fine. Now, so remember, ritual impurity only applies in the temple. So most people in Israel at that time and now are usually ritually impure. That's just a fact of life. We're all ritually impure because we've all touched someone who's died. At some point, you shook someone's hand and that person maybe worked at a hospital or someone died or somebody went to a grave. Chris, you're so impure. So everybody's ritually impure. That's not a bad thing, okay? Ritual impurity is not a sin, okay? In Leviticus, when you read about ritual impurity, it's talking in the context of the temple. It's not talking about day-to-day life, okay? So now, if Jeff, who's impure, touches this other guy named John, right? And Jeff touches John. Now John is impure, okay? Because he's impure. Impurity in like the temple context, it's kind of like contagious. So basically, if I'm impure and I touch you, it makes her impure. And then if she touches you, she can make you impure. Depending on the kind of impurity, there's a lot of different kinds. It's a whole long thing. There's different kinds of impurities. But the death one, if you touch someone who touched someone who died, they're impure. And then if you touch someone who touched someone who touched someone who died, you're also impure. Okay, so it's like a chain reaction. Okay, so he was fine, but then he touched him, so now he's impure. Okay, now what happens to John? He dies. He sinned and he has to make atonement, or literally nothing unless he wants to go to the temple. Yes, number 3, exactly. He's fine. Everything is fine. He's not sinned. He hasn't done anything. He's technically impure, but not impure in a dirty sense. It's just in the sense of like you can't go to the temple. That's fine. You're good. You know what I mean? So if he touches bread, right, and a priest who serves less than a month a year can't touch that bread, okay? So in the case of John, for example, if he touches bread, that makes the bread impure, okay? Now, the bread is fine. It's not dirty. Nothing happened to the bread. But if you happen to be a priest who serves at the temple, in that time they would serve maybe 3 weeks in the year. So priests were not even full-time. The high priest was the only full-time person. So if you happen to be a priest and you're serving in that week, you can't touch them. That's it. If you're serving in the temple, which most of us don't qualify for priests because we're not Aaron's descendants, so we can't even be a priest if we wanted to. Again, so you see how it doesn't apply to us, right? So it just applies in a very specific context. Now, if a priest touches them, he just needs to do like a little ritual where he like cleans himself. He needs to like take a shower, basically. And then it's like a ritual he has to do. We're not going to go into the details of the ritual. It's just like washing, basically, in a way. That's it. But, so can John and Jeff or anyone else who isn't going to the temple, can they eat that bread?
Yes.
Yes, it's literally fine. Nothing happens. Now, if you're a priest who happen to be on one of your 2 weeks to 3 weeks of service that week, then you don't touch the bread. You stay in the temple, you maintain clean and whatever, and then you do like ritual immersion. So you clean yourself and you're fine and you can serve at the temple, right? So they're fine. There's nothing wrong here. Nothing. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't sin. Nothing is wrong here, right? Because ritual impurity is not a sin. Now, imagine there's this girl and she's in the time of the month, okay? One, she dies, probably. She sin has to do atonement, or literally nothing because she just can't go to the temple, right? So probably 1 and 2, 1 and 3, sorry. So she's literally fine, okay? She just can't go to the temple. That's fine. Like, no big deal, right? Because ritual impurity is not a sin. Most people are usually ritually impure. We're all ritually impure from the death impurity because we all have touched somebody who's touched someone who's touched something in someone. Have you guys ever been to a grave or around the grave? Yes, okay, you're ritually impure. That's fine. You can't go to the temple. The temple's not even built. You see how it doesn't apply, right? And so, this guy, he's just minding his own business. He's not going to the temple. He's just trying to eat bread, okay? We all love to eat bread. I was gluten-free for 10 years. Now I'm not. I love bread, okay? I love it so much. Like, y'all don't understand. Anyways, so he's just minding, leave him alone, okay? So he's just trying to eat bread. What happens to John if he eats that bread? He dies.
He died.
He's sinned and has to make he's celiac, then I guess. Literally nothing because he's just eating bread. He's fine, right? Nothing happened. It doesn't matter if he's ritually impure. Nothing happened. He's fine. But the Pharisees, they said, no, he's not fine. He's actually sinning. You see how it doesn't make sense? You see how, so the Pharisees, what they were doing is that they were applying, so according to the Pharisees, he sinned. So the Pharisee wouldn't have picked number 3 because he's literally just eating bread. Leave him alone. No, the Pharisee said, no, he actually is sinning, okay? So is that biblical? No, it's not, because impurities only has to do with the temple, right? So this has nothing to do with anything. It's just, he just touched a corpse. He's not sinning unless he wants to go to the temple. But the Pharisee said, no, you have to be pure all the time. Even if you're not going to the temple, you have to be pure all the time. Does that make sense? It makes no sense, right? And so Jeff can't even enjoy his bread. Like, leave the man alone. John, not Jeff, that's John. Is this biblical? No, because ritual impurity is not a sin. So ritual impurity is not a sin, but the Pharisees made it out to be. So they tried to apply temple rules to day-to-day life, but temple rules don't apply to day-to-day life. Make sense? So you can get ideas from the temple, like, spiritual things, like this is really nice, this is a nice idea. Like there's some people that they wash their hands on Shabbat before eating the bread, kind of like a ritual thing, like it's like a symbolic thing, like whenever Jesus, he washed the feet of the disciples. Like that's like, the Bible doesn't say to wash your feet, but it's a nice thing that he did because it's a symbolic thing, right? And so the same thing on the Sabbath, some people have the tradition of washing their hands before eating their bread, like a symbolic thing, but it's not that you're sinning if you don't do it. You see what I mean? But the Pharisees were like, this is not symbolic. This is Bible. If you don't do this, you're sinning. And Yeshua was like, no, wait, leave John alone. He can eat his bread, okay? So again, the only people that have to ritually wash and follow all the rituals, all the specific rituals, were the priests before the temple service, which they only served around 3 to 4 weeks per year. So they didn't even do it all the time. Like the priests were not pure all the time either, right? You see how it doesn't make sense? So then that's where the Pharisees they went, and the teachers of the law, and they came to Jesus from Jerusalem, and they said, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? Do you notice how they're not breaking the Bible, or they're not breaking the law? No, they're breaking the tradition of the elders. You're breaking our traditions. We made up these rules, now you have to follow them. And Jesus is like, no, what? Wait a minute. They don't wash their hands before they eat. Where does the Bible say you have to wash your hands before you eat? It's nice, it's good, like, germs. We don't want germs and stuff, don't eat bats and don't wash your hands. That's great. That should stop a lot of stuff. But it's not a rule. It's not a Bible commandment. But they made it up, and then they were expecting people to follow their rules, right? See how it doesn't make any sense? And so that's why that has to do with this stuff. It doesn't really have to do with impure animals. He's not talking about, like, eating sharks and stuff. He's talking about, like, don't make that type of impurity a day-to-day thing because it doesn't apply. This only applies to the temple. This always applies. See, like, the distinction between the two. And so then Yeshua completely obliterates them. So whoever wants to read that, it's my voice. Thank you.
You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. Yeshua called the crowd to him and said, listen and understand. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them.
Again, so if we look at this, in the case of defiling for the temple, what comes out of the body is what defiles you. Emissions, the time of the month, that's the temple ritual rules, right? And so he said, and then he's also making a connection to your moral character, right? Because he says what comes out of somebody's mouth does not defile. What comes into the mouth doesn't defile what comes out of the mouth. What is he talking about there, right? So then the disciples asked him. Does anybody want to read that?
I could read this again.
Thank you.
Then the disciples came to him and asked, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? He replied, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them. They are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both fall into a pit. Uh-oh. Peter said, explain the parable to us. Are you still so dull? Yeshua asked them. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them.
See, so the whole issue in this case is literally talking about ritual hand washing, right? So he's saying, hey, if you don't wash your hands before eating bread, you're fine. But if you're committing adultery, you're murdering people, you're doing sexual immorality, you're doing theft, false testimony, and slander, then you're actually wrong, see? Because what happens with the Pharisees is that they were following all of these rules, which is cute and all. Like, if you want to follow them, that's fine. Like, there's nothing unbiblical about it. But what the thing they were doing is that they were replacing it. They were doing, hey, look, I washed my hands. And they stole from a guy yesterday. You see what I mean? So it's like a hypocrisy. So that's why he calls them hypocrites. He's like, you're literally hypocrites because you're following all these dainty rules about temple purity, making yourselves holier than everyone else, while you're doing false testimony, you're slandering people, you're stealing from people. So basically you're replacing the biblical commands, which is don't do adultery. All of these different rules that God literally said, don't do all of these. Don't murder, don't do adultery, don't do sexual immorality. Don't, these are all like, a lot of them are like literally the 10 Commandments. Like that's like the basic 10 Commandments stuff, basic Bible school stuff. And they weren't following the basic Bible school stuff, but they were following the meticulous temple rules, which didn't apply to them. You see what I mean? And so that's why he says, this is not what defiles a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. So you're not going to get defiled from washing with unwashed hands. You're good. But now if you do all these things, then you're going to be defiled. See what I mean? How they were trying to like replace one thing with the other. So that out of the way. Another section, it talks about Yeshua healing the daughter of a Canaanite woman. So we're not really going to go into too many details there, but it's a really interesting story if you want to read it on your free time. And then we see that Yeshua feeds the 4,000. This is really like famous in all the movies. They always make the movies of how he multiplied the fish and the bread. And, you know, very famous story. They needed bread. I need fish. Love those things. And so, anyone who want to read this one?
Okay, I'll read it.
Okay.
Yeshua left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised God of Israel. Yeshua called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way. All right. His disciples answered, where could we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd? How many loaves do you have? Yeshua asked. 7, they replied, and a few small fish. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and when he had given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and they in turn to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate were 4,000 men, besides the women and children.
So why is the Bible telling us those random numbers, right? Why do we need to know how much bread there was, and why do I need to know how many people were fed, right? Because numbers are very important. In the Jewish mindset, remember this was written in Judea, so they were all Jewish, it has a lot to do. So numbers are really important. Even nowadays, you ask any Jewish person, they're very into numbers. So it's really important, okay? So in Second Temple Judaism, numbers were symbolic. It wasn't just like a factual thing. So they could have had like maybe 6.5 breads or something like that. Like it was just like, they were like, you know what, 7, 7, okay? Even the 4,000 people, was it exactly 4,000? It could have been 4,001, 4,002. Like, it's not like they sat there and counted every person. It was just really important to them to notice, hey, 4,000 people were there. Why are they 4,000? 4 represents the whole world, okay? So the Hebrew scripture, they speak of the 4 winds and the 4 corners of the world. They believe that the earth was flat. That's their belief in the ancient times. So they believe that the world had like 4 corners, okay? And so whenever you hear the number 4 in the Bible, it's usually talking about the 4 corners of the world. It's basically the entire world, okay? And you can see those verses that talks about it. The miracle actually occurs in a Gentile setting, so those people were not Jewish. And the crowd praises the God of Israel, so it mentions that the people were not Jewish, right? So in Jewish numerology, 4,000, it's basically complete and worldwide fulfillment of God's purposes. Why? Because 4,000, like 1,000 is considered like the biggest number. It's like the crazy number in like Jewish mentality. When you say 4,000, it's like a complete totality. So imagine you have 4,000, you're like, oh, a complete totality of the entire world. It's basically what it like represents. And then in Jewish symbolism, 7 actually represents completion, it's perfection and fullness. It has like a spiritual and universal sense. So 7 is like the perfect number. Like whenever you see perfection in the Jewish mindset, it's 7, right? And so that's why there's 7 days of the week. There's a lot of 7s everywhere. Like, what? Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of different rules and a lot of different traditions and a lot of things in the Bible talk about that. Whenever you see 7, think like perfection and completion, okay? So in this section, the 7 loaves and the 7 baskets, they signal that God's provision is complete. So 7 represents something that's complete, 100% perfect, right? And so the 7 loaves, it represents God being perfect, like God perfectly provides for everyone 100%, not only to the Jews in Israel, but also to the Gentiles in the nations, right? And so that's why we see the number 7 and 4,000. 7 represents completeness and perfection. Why does it have to tell you there's 7 breads, right? Why did they have to be 7 breads? It could have been 8 or 9 or 10 breads. Why 7? And then 4 represents the 4 corners of the earth. And then 1,000 represents like abundant fullness. It's like the biggest number ever. So when you see 4,000, it's like everybody in the entire world is going to be completely fed and provided for by God. Basically, that's what it means, okay? So that was really interesting. I didn't know about that. Kudos to Johnny. He sent me that article. So yeah, so now we're going to look at Matthew 16. Not too in-depth with this one. But Yeshua says, be careful. Yeshua said to them, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So what is the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Okay. The yeast, basically in Jewish mindset, yeast is bad. Yeast is like a bad thing. It's not good. Nowadays, again, we love bread, so yeast is good. But in the Jewish mindset, yeast is a really bad thing. So whenever you hear yeast in a Jewish context, it's bad, okay? And so he said, be careful with the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. What is that yeast? It's the yeast of hypocrisy. So we saw in the story before where they were taking random temple rules and they were applying things that didn't apply and making people believe that it was from the Bible and that you're sinning when you're not sinning. Meanwhile, they were sinning, right? So it's like a whole hypocrisy. You're like, you don't wash your hands before you eat bread. But meanwhile, they were probably stealing from people, right? So that's why Yeshua calls them hypocrites, and that's the yeast of the Pharisees. Because it's like, be careful not to be like them. So if you want to follow tradition, there's a lot of different traditional stuff. Like if you see the service today, not some of it, it's biblically principled, but some of it, it's traditional. Like from Yeshua's time, there were still those traditions. So there's nothing wrong with tradition. It just depends on how you go about it, right? Now, if you come to service and you know all the prayers by memory and you're just an amazing serviceer, right? Service comer or whatever you want to call it. But then the next day you go and you steal from someone. What's the point, right? It's pointless. So you can't have one without the other. The service, like different things that you do for God and a different, like for example, like the hand washing, that's nice. If your intention is to honor God, you'd be like, hey, you know what? This is how I want to honor God. I want to like do something that they did in the temple because it's special to me. And I want to wash my hands to show my loyalty to God, right? So it's like a way of showing you, that's fine. But the Pharisees weren't doing it in that way. They were imposing on everybody, if you don't do this, you're sinning. And I don't care if the Bible doesn't say it, you're sinning, right? So that's the point. The point of the Pharisees is that they were taking human rules and applying them where they don't apply, being hypocritical about it, right? And so that applies to everything. Like anything that you do, what is your intention in doing it, right? So if you come to the prayers, what's your intention of coming to pray? You know, it's like usually it's a good intention with most people here, so it's not bad. But in the case of the Pharisees, they would pray and they would be amazing in the synagogues and amazing everywhere. But then when they went home, they would lie about people. They would do slander. They would steal, sexual immorality. They would do everything bad behind closed doors. But in public, they were amazing, right? So it's like both. It's like one doesn't cancel out the other, right? And so there's a lot of different things that maybe they're not literally in the Bible, but you do them to honor God and to show your loyalty to God, like Yeshua did. Like, for example, Yeshua washed the feet of the disciples. That's not in the Bible. You don't have to do that, right? But he did it anyway because it was his way of showing, like, honor and giving honor to his disciples. So it's like a symbolic thing. So there's nothing wrong with doing symbolic things. It's just what's your intention, right? So that's for the Pharisees. For the Sadducees had a different yeast. The Sadducees didn't believe in most of the Bible. Does anybody have a Bible? Like a Bible? Yes. Okay. Can I have it? Oh, yes, please. So the Sadducees believed. Okay. So this is the New Testament. So the New Testament didn't exist in that time. It was being written. So obviously we didn't have it yet. The Sadducees only believed in this much. Like they didn't believe in all of the prophets. So basically Isaiah, the book of Psalms, Proverbs, everything from David and Solomon and Ruth, they didn't believe in this. They just believed in this part, the 5 books, and that's it. So obviously, if you don't believe in this, it's going to be kind of complicated theologically. And so since they didn't believe in all of this, they didn't believe in the Sadducees, not the Pharisees. Pharisees believe in all of that. The Sadducees didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They thought that you just live once and that's it. Basically, YOLO. Yeah, YOLO, literally. So that whenever you say your Sadducees, think YOLO. They were very Romanized. So if you don't believe in the afterlife, if you don't believe that you have to, be a good person to live in the afterlife, your attitude is going to be really different. So they were very Romanized. They were very corrupt. And they were very like, YOLO, it doesn't matter. We do whatever we want. Don't believe in angels. Don't believe in resurrection. So that's why whenever you hear in the New Testament, you're going to see a lot of Sadducees are going to go to Yeshua and they're going to be like, and what about this? What about the resurrection? And Yeshua counteracts them because they were asking a resurrection question because they didn't believe it, right? So imagine just being in that time. There's so many crazy different things that were happening, going on. The Pharisees and Sadducees, a lot of time, they're grouped together, but they're completely different. They hated each other. So that's why he says the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees are 2 different yeasts. One yeast was like, we don't believe in the Bible, basically just a little bit. And then the other one was like, we will believe in all the Bible and we're going to add a bunch of stuff to it. So it's like completely different mindsets, but they were both bad. All right, so where did that come out? All right, so whoever wants to read this one.
All right. But what about you? He asked. What do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Yeshua replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, but whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah.
So this is where Catholics say that Peter was the first pope. Yeah, literally they take that verse, I've seen it online, and they're like, because they're like debating Protestants. So the Catholics are like, yeah, because Jesus said that Peter will build my church. And so they say that Peter was literally a pope. Like, it makes no sense. Like, that's not, where did you get that from, right? And so, yeah, so Catholic and Protestant debates are like so fun. Anyways, so that's not what he's talking about. But I really want to focus on that part. The gates of Hades will not overcome it. What does that even mean? That's because the whole message of the New Testament, the whole message of the Bible is how God defeats death, right? Because death is what everybody suffers from. Nobody gets away from death. Everybody dies. No matter if you're nice, if you're a bad person. Doesn't matter how many vitamins you take, how much, whatever. It doesn't matter. Everybody dies, right? So the whole message of the New Testament is how God completely obliterates death. How does he do that? By resurrecting Yeshua. right? The resurrection is basically evidence that God has dominion over death, right? So the fact that then that's why it's so important for you to believe that Yeshua, where it says like you have to confess with your mouth that Yeshua is Lord and that he's been resurrected. Why? Why is that so important? Because if you recognize that Yeshua has been resurrected, you're like, okay, I recognize that he's been resurrected, so you get resurrected. Makes sense? Because you recognize God's authority. But if you don't recognize that Yeshua was resurrected, you're not recognizing God's authority. So here it says the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Death. Hades was like the underworld for the Greeks. So he says the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Basically, death will not overcome Yeshua's movement. So it's not going to overcome. So on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. You're not going to overcome it. It's not been overcome. We're still here, right? And so it literally came true. We're still here, still believing in God, we still have the Bible. And so the gates of death, how many people have died for the Gospels, right? How many people have died horrible deaths in different persecutions, in different times in histories, whatever country, name a country there's probably been a persecution, right? But the gates of Hades have never overcome it. It's been a lot of death, but death has not overcome it. We're still here, right? And so that's just like a really interesting thing. I was like, the gates of Hades, like I remember from Hercules, I was like, what? Hercules? And then this is one of my favorites. So who wants to read this one?
Me? Me again?
Probably.
Then Yeshua said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done.
So what did the cross represent? That was the object of crucifixion. So what did that represent in the Roman times? If you had to give it one word.
What did the cross represent?
Yes.
Death.
Death. And
Awkward.
Shame. Yes, shame. All right, so that was the worst way to die in that time, okay? And so for the Romans, they had different ways of dying. So basically different execution ways, right? So if you were a Roman citizen, you had more upper class. So you had better resources, basically. And the government respected you a little more. So for the Romans, it would have been like decapitation. That was like an honorable death. But this was the worst kind of death. Like the worst death you could ever have was crucifixion. That was like the most shameful thing. And for the Romans, honor was really important. Because nowadays we don't really think about honor too much. But if anybody's watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, yes? Okay, good. So you guys remember Zuko, right? Yes. Or like sometimes we look at Zuko, we like make fun of him, like you and your honor, like what are you talking about, right? But what happened to Zuko? His dad told him, you need to fight me. And he said, no, I'm not going to fight you. So he dishonored his father in front of everyone. His father burnt him. So Zuko is not dishonored, and he has a mark of his dishonor forever. So what does he do? He goes trying to find the avatar to reclaim his honor. To us, we see that as like, yeah, that's a kid's show. No, that was the most normal thing. If that would have happened in the Roman time, that was the most normal reaction to that, because he had to reclaim his honor and his status. Because otherwise, he was done for. He was done for societally. He didn't have any hope for the future. If you had bad honor in the Roman times, you couldn't get a job. Like now you have a resume. In that time, their resume was what other people think about you. So do other people think that you're honorable or not? You have to keep a good reputation, basically. So when you think honor, think reputation or self-worth, basically. And so in that time, reputation was the highest, most important thing. Otherwise, you don't get a job and you die, basically, because you needed a patron and you needed to have status in your society so you could literally eat, right? So if you didn't have honor, you couldn't eat, okay? So it's really important for them. So Yeshua is literally telling them, you have to take up your cross and follow me. He's saying them, it doesn't matter what everybody else says, you have to follow me. So that's a huge thing. Imagine for a Roman, that would have been like, wait, what do you mean I have to take up a cross? That would have been the worst of the worst thing that you could ever tell a person in the Roman society, take up a cross. They would have been petrified if you told them that. Yes.
That just clicked with me. That's before he even gets like what's the word? Accused?
Crucified.
Crucified. Yeah. Before anything.
Yeah.
He's telling them to take up the cross. So that's like it just dawned on me that.
Yeah. And then he showed the example and took up the cross. So it's like
exactly. That's insane.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. By any chance, do you know the figure of how heavy the cross would be?
Oof, I don't know. I mean, visually, yeah, pretty heavy.
Probably like easily 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I would say
or more.
Yeah.
Probably more. It depends on the size.
Yeah. And so yeah, so it's like, and that's why like when you follow Yeshua, it's like you have to take up your own cross and you have to follow his example. Like I remember I was reading this book about honor shame. It completely changed my life, and I never thought about it in that way. It was always there, but it was like my epiphany. It was like I don't know. It really changed. Like this changed my life completely because it was like because a lot of times you go through stuff in life and you're like ashamed in a way. You know what I mean? You wanna like have your way and things like that, right? And you worry about what other people say about you. You're worried about, peer pressure and things like that. But when you see what Yeshua went through, he told you, take up the cross. And the disciples are probably like, what do you mean take up a cross? I can't take up a cross. What do you mean? I'm not gonna have any employment. I'm not gonna have a future. I'm not gonna have anything in my life if I take up a cross. And then Yeshua took it up and he showed them how to do it, right? And so it's just like you look to that example and you're like, if Yeshua could go through that and he never dishonored God, then we can go through our hardships in life and not dishonor God too. You see what I mean? So it's like Yeshua went through that and he was up there, and what did he do? He prayed to God. He literally prayed a psalm like right before he died. And so he was up there and everybody was mocking him. Mockery in the Roman mindset was the worst thing because again, think of Zuko. Zuko was everybody in that time, okay? Everybody was obsessed with honor. It was how society worked, right? Our society is like a guilt-based. There's different societies. There's called honor shame-based. There's guilt-based. So we think of things as right or wrong, right? Pretty much we'd all agree. In honor shame society, they don't think of right or wrong. They think of honorable and dishonorable, okay? Sometimes it'll be the same. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes what's honorable is not good, okay? And so that's how they thought. They saw the world in the lens of honor shame. So when you see Yeshua, he's literally on the cross, and you see people, you see like the chief people were coming, and it literally says there, they came in front of him and they mocked him, and they were like, are you the son of God then, or you're dying? So they were mocking him. And Yeshua, instead of saying, God, you left me, right? What am I supposed to do? No, he prayed to God and he continued and he stayed there, right? So he had every opportunity to just say, no, I give up. I don't want to do this anymore. But he still stood up, even though everybody shamed him. After all the fights that he has with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, imagine being there up on the cross. The Pharisees basically won, right? The Pharisees won. They're like, yep, see, he got his way. We won. He was wrong. He was wrong and we were right. But then he gets resurrected. And that's like the important thing about the resurrection is not just life or death, it's honor and dishonor. He was completely shamed. He was in the Roman mindset. He was the lowest of the low. Think of the lowest of the low person ever in like society. That's what he would have been seen if he was crucified, right? And so all the Pharisees are probably like, yeah, we got him, that we won. But then he gets resurrected by God. Like it's so crazy if we look at it in that context. The resurrection is insane when we think about it, but it's even more insane when you think of that society, how they viewed things. So Yeshua took up the cross. He told them, take up the cross, and then he showed you how to do it. And so that's like a thing for everybody. It's like who determines your self-worth and your honor, right? Because a lot of times we think that we have like not self-control. I always lose the word. Not autonomy. Like when you're free to do whatever you want. Free will. We think that we have free will, right? We think like, yeah, I do everything because I decide to do it. No, you don't. Everybody is influenced by someone. We were all babies and we're all influenced by someone, right? Like babies don't have opinions, right? And so whatever we do is a lot of times dependent on what other people think of us, right? So how do we choose where we work? You're going to choose a place that's honorable, that's decent, right? If you choose an indecent place, who said it's indecent? Who are you? You know what I mean? And so who determines your honor is going to determine how you act, right? And so in the case of us, it's like depends on what's your social circle, right? So if you surround yourself with the wrong people, they're gonna influence you to do wrong things because you want to look to them, right? Look good to them, right? And so it's not wrong to want to be accepted by people. That's totally normal. That's how we were wired. That's how God made us. But the problem is, who do you want to give your self-worth to, right? If Yeshua is the one giving you self-worth, you're gonna do the right thing. But if you have the world giving you self-worth, you're gonna do the wrong thing, right? Because the world's gonna tell you to do whatever they want you to do, and it's not good. But Yeshua, who took up the cross, he did everything. He went all the way for God. Whenever you think of that, like in this mindset of like, you go all the way for God, it does not matter. If that's God's will, I'll take it. It doesn't matter. I'm all the way, right? He went all the way. He didn't even get decapitated. Decapitated would have been an honorable way to die. It would have been an okay way to die. He died in the worst, most gruesome, most painful for honor. In that time, there's this book I was reading about honor and shame. It literally said that dishonor was more painful than death. People prefer, have you seen the samurai movies where they suicide themselves? And you're like, why would you do that? Because for them, dishonor is more painful than death. That's literally what it is. So they would rather die than be dishonored. So imagine Yeshua died. He could have just, I don't know, you know what I mean, not died or whatever, you know what I mean? But he went all the way for God. He was like, yes, I'm going to take the worst dishonor, the worst everything. I'll take it for you, right? And so when you look at it in that sense, like, you're like, okay, I can take not getting my way if I didn't get a job that I wanted. If Yeshua was on the cross and he went all the way for God, I can go all the way for God in my little problems. You know what I mean? Like, my little problems don't even have anything. You know what I mean? Like, take up your cross is not just like in the big decisions of life. It's also in the small decisions where you don't get your way in small things. You take up your cross and you're fine. You know, Yeshua went through all of that. I can handle this. You know what I mean? So just take that as like a metaphor. Yes.
I also really like that approach because it just clicked with me that, wow, I'm making connections now because I just realized that he's talking about this foreshadow. It's interesting that Yeshua was innocent. And you have the Pharisees, the Sadducees, even the Greeks and Romans making fun of him and teasing him while he's up on the cross. It's actually kind of resonating with me because in our movement, in our congregation, we follow Torah. We keep a lot of traditions that are inherently Jewish, but yet we do recognize Yeshua as the Messiah, which is something that we don't share with Judaism, but following Torah is something that we don't share with many Christians. And so we're kind of in this in-between that where we're not accepted by either, and there's mockery and shame thrown at us from both sides. It's kind of interesting that kind of resonated with me in that respect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it can resonate with everything. Like, anything in life that you're going through, just think of Yeshua, what he went through, and the shame that he went through. That any shame you go through, it pales in comparison. You know what I mean? And if it's for God's glory, it's going to be good, and God will defend you, just like he defended Yeshua. God resurrected Yeshua. He didn't let Yeshua just die. He let him die, and then he resurrected him. That was like the biggest 180 for a Roman. That would have been insane. Like, you're resurrected? What do you mean you're resurrected? Again, the Romans thought that the emperor was the son of God. Like, the Romans, to them, the emperor, like Caesar and Augustus and all these really weird emperors, look into their daily lives. Really weird. They used to think those were the sons of God. Those were like the most important people ever. They literally thought the emperor was the son of God. So then Yeshua here, he's crucified and he's resurrected, and then he's called the Son of God. Like, to a Roman, that would have been like, what? What do you mean? Like, that was like, it's insane for us, but it's even more insane for a Roman person. So I was like, honor and shame is like my favorite topic ever. Anyways, so, and I also find it interesting because remember, Joseph was falsely accused and he was thrown in the pit, which represents death. Yeshua was falsely accused and he was thrown in the pit. And so it's like a false accusation in both. And so another connection with Joseph. There's always a million different connections. So yeah, so that's really interesting because it was both false accusations. And so in both cases. So to summarize everything, that was a lot today. I'm surprised I'm still like talking. All right, so life is all about choices. Always choose what God wants you to choose, even if it's unpopular. Take up your cross, right? That's what Yeshua said. Before Yeshua was taken to the crucifixion, he literally told everybody, take up the shame. Do it even if it's unpopular, because God will defend you. And that's what we learn from the resurrection, that God defends Yeshua. Even if the world kills you metaphorically, even if the world shames you, God will resurrect you. You know what I mean? And so then, just like he did for us, God took Joseph from death to life. And he took Yeshua from death to life, because God doesn't let his loyal people live in shame and stay in the pit and stay in prison. And, you know, whatever person, there's a lot of different stories like that in the Bible. In the case of Joseph, he was falsely thrown in prison. Yeshua was falsely killed, right? So God doesn't let the people that are loyal to him stay in shame. He literally resurrects them in a way, you know, metaphorically or literally. And, you know, eventually, literally. And so there are many parallels between Yeshua and Joseph. As we saw, there's a lot of them. And really important, whenever we're talking about the Pharisees, ritual purity is not a sin. So whenever you guys read Leviticus, you're going to read a lot about different impurities, about, like, you know, the time of the month. When somebody gives birth, when a woman gives birth, you're impure for like 60 days if it's a boy, and then 90 days if you had a girl. It's not a sin. It's just you can't go to the temple, and that's fine. And if you just gave birth, you don't want to go to the temple. You want to stay home with your baby. Like, you know, it doesn't make sense. And so ritual impurity is not a sin. Don't let nobody tell you it's a sin. So if you read the book of Leviticus, don't get scared. It's not a sin. It only applies to the temple in most cases. There's other cases in Leviticus where it does apply to day-to-day life. Love your neighbor as yourself is in Leviticus. So that obviously applies. There's a lot of, you know, rules that apply in Leviticus, but there's a lot that don't, especially the ritual impurity ones, you know, like the eating ones, they do apply. Like, you know, there's different ones that still apply. But ritual impurity in the sense of, like, like emissions and giving birth, time of the month, and corpse impurity, those only apply to the temple. And then moral purity can't be ignored for unnecessary ritual purity / traditions. So whatever you do, even if you do, different traditions is great. I love traditions. I have different, different ones that you adopt, like it really has enhanced my life, like different Jewish traditions. But if you understand them, you can't just do them because you just, just doing them for nothing. Like in my case, like it takes like, I don't know, it took me a couple years to like understand one. I was like, wow, this is really nice. I'm going to do this now. And it really does enhance your life. But you have to make sure that you're good and you're not sinning, before you take on the extra. You have to make sure where your heart is at and not just do things just because I want to look more, I don't know, holy or whatever. Like it's just like traditions enhance your life, but it has to be from the right place. It's not in the place of like, I'm going to judge everybody. You don't wash your hands before eating bread. Like I don't do that every day anyways, but you know what I mean? But if you choose to do that, and that's a way that you want to show your loyalty to God and honor God, that's totally fine. Just don't judge other people if they don't, right? Because it's not a law. So that's it. Shabbat of good week.